Hey everybody, welcome to the latest edition of The Intelligent Estate, where luxury meets smart living. I'm Travis Leo, and today we're taking the podcast on the road. With me today is Bryan Mills from Mills Technologies in Chicago, Illinois. Mills Technologies is a leading provider of home technology solutions across the Midwest, and Bryan was recently asked to be a presenter at the ASID Gather Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Bryan used this opportunity to interview an interior designer about their experiences with technology and best practices for incorporating technology into today's modern design. We'll get to that interview in a bit, but before we did, I wanted to talk to Bryan about the event and design professionals in general. So, Bryan, thanks for being a fill-in host for The Intelligent Estate, and welcome to The Intelligent Estate. Tell us a little bit about the event and how it went and why you were asked to present there.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So the event was in late summer. It was 3 days in Atlanta, Georgia, and really it focused on inviting the interior design community together for education, celebration, a lot of recognition, and then a lot of networking as well. So, one of the things that I learned, we focus a little bit more on residential than commercial, but ASID is really a big mix of designers focus on not just residential, but a lot of commercial, educational, institutional projects. So you have a big mix of people there. One of the other things that I took away from it is just how influential and how strong and connected local ASID chapters are. So kind of the hierarchy for ASID is that everybody has their local chapters in their state or their metro area. And there's a lot of networking that happens at that level. So when they come together, a lot of times they're sitting together, they're meeting together at that local level, and then at the national kind of level as well. And I want to give a shout out to the ASID Education Committee. So they're the ones who invited me kind of through CEDIA, which Travis, as you know, is our industry's kind of organization, right? Professional accreditation organization. But we submitted for topics that we thought was going to be relevant to them, and they did a great job of making sure that we were prepared. So we had to submit, kind of our educational plan. We had to do some dress rehearsals, but they ran an exceptionally good event.
What did you take away from the event, Bryan? I mean, what are interior designers paying attention to when it comes to technology in these high-end homes today?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I think one of the biggest takeaways is you're getting a mix of people in it. And in my session, while we did have residential interior designers, we also had several that do work in others. I think if there was one thing that I took away from the event, I think sometimes we in the design builds community sometimes think of the interior designers at the most superficial of levels, and I mean that in a very polite way. But like we think of them in terms of furniture and fabrics and kind of that layer of the design. And in spending time with them and watching some of the presentations, I think they have a much deeper purpose. I think one of the things that consistently that I heard was just the opportunity that they see to create just tremendous, beautiful, meaningful spaces that people can spend time in for whatever it is, for whether it's for work, whether it's for relaxing at home. And they take that very seriously. And so, it isn't just that layer. It's really thinking about, how people are going to use the space and what can they do to make that space better. So I think overall that was the big takeaway.
Are you seeing interior designers become more aware of technology solutions and how technology solutions can help these spaces, or is it still, are they just kind of scratching the surface in their knowledge of this space?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think, something that I saw is if an interior designer that I spoke to had some sort of relationship with a technology professional, like somebody like us, that was more for than just one project, right? Like they weren't thinking about just what can we do on this project, and it was really an ongoing relationship where maybe they worked together a few times. They do some sort of educational events between them. I think those interior designers were probably the most knowledgeable in terms of what options are available for the home. But there was a big mix. I mean, certainly things that they're going to focus on are going to be those products and systems that most impact them. So certainly motorized window treatments is going to be high on that list. That is something that they're still very interested in. Lighting and lighting control are also, extremely important, and they're recognizing that lighting is radically changing. I know you've had an earlier episode of this podcast that delved into that, but I know they're aware of that, and what that touch and feel is like. And of course, they're always going to be interested in what does that TV look like on the wall. So that's going to come up as well.
I listened to the interview that you did, and we'll play that here for the listeners in a little bit, but stay tuned if you want to hear some thoughts on TVs on walls from an interior designer. You say the knowledge is growing if you have a relationship, and you kind of mentioned this, a lot of times I think we're guilty of looking at interior designers as superficial, right? I had a builder one time tell me, what's the difference between a terrorist and an interior designer? And that's that you can negotiate with a terrorist. I think we I think we tend to look at it that way. But in listening to the interview that you did and seeing more about what ASID does and what they talk about, they go a lot deeper than that. So talk a little bit about that and how, as a trade partner, you can partner at a deeper level with an interior designer to really bring a space to life and really bring that magic home for the client that you're ultimately collectively working for.
So I think interior designers in some ways are very similar to home technology professionals. Like, there's lots of different ways they operate. There can be one-person operations. There can be offices with tens, if not hundreds of people. And I think that's one of the things just to kind of keep in mind in terms of like how they're structured. I'm always a big fan of leading with home technology professionals being the subject matter experts, right? That us being a resource. And it's similar in the way that we approach our relationships with architects as well. Is we're not interested in just the single project. I mean, the single project is great, but the reality is we're really interested in forming a relationship. I've got designers and architects that will call us that we're not on the project. The client had chosen somebody else, but they know that we can provide a good solution or a recommendation for it. And I don't mind that, right? I'm somewhat flattered when they call us, but a lot of it is leading with education. We're very big into doing lunch and learns through CEDIA. We're accredited to come in to designers, to architects, and do present. And they get CEUs for that, and that's something that's important. I think, that's one of the things I also took away from the event is ASID is wanting to make sure that the interior designers that are out there doing work are accredited to do the work. Something similar that we see in our own industry is, they want to make sure that there's a raised bar in terms of the work being performed.
How many designers were at this conference that you were at?
Boy, that's a good question. I would say, and this is me speculating based on the large events I was at, it was probably a few thousand. So not a huge event, in terms of like the tens of thousands, but enough to represent, all the states in the country.
Bryan, I know you guys have recently redone your Experience Center space in Chicago, and a lot of that focus is around design and aesthetics as opposed to technology. Talk about how you bring in a designer in, so somebody that may be on a project that you guys are working on or somebody that you've become familiar with through a network or something. What do you walk them through? What do you talk to them about when they start exploring the world of technology in your area?
Yeah, a lot of certainly clients and the design team are interested in the function. What does it do? How does it sound? That sort of thing. But what we find, especially in those projects where we're brought in by designers, where we're brought in by architects, is they very much care what it looks like, right? I mean, at the end of the day, a speaker is a speaker to some degree in their minds, right? And it is, I know you had a business and a lot of clients, I'm not an audiophile. And so sometimes people have a hard time understanding, hey, there's this 10-inch round speaker, and it maybe costs $600-700. Why on earth would I spend $2,000 for a speaker I can't see that maybe doesn't sound as good, or maybe even $3,500 for a pair of speakers just to get that opening size to be 4 inches instead of 10 inches? And so I think it's one of those things that we can talk about, but actually being in the space and seeing it, especially in the context of the lighting, it makes a huge difference, right? And certainly designers are very much touch, feel type of people. They like to have samples. They have huge sample libraries. So to be able to come into a showroom like ours and see those things, very quickly say, oh, I get it. We have 10-inch speakers and then a 4-inch speaker. All of our lights are 3 or 4 inches. Why would you spend the premium on a 3-inch mud-in light just to ruin it with a 10-inch visible speaker, right? And I can say that, and some people may kind of understand it, but you spend about 5 seconds looking at the ceiling, and then you say, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, let's do that." At least in the areas the public areas where we're going to see it, our guests are going to see it, that we're entertaining in.
So you mentioned apertures and the like. What advice would you give designers or people building high-end luxury homes when it comes to balancing form and function? I mean, obviously there's lots of places you can spend money to increase the form, but some may not be a great return on your investment, or you may not get the look that you're looking for. What are some of your favorites and sort of dollars for dollars or wow factor that you see most impactful in the design community in these luxury homes?
Yeah, I think sometimes people think the solution is a what, and one of the things that I'm a big fan of is I think it always starts with who and then how. And I know that's a little bit of a bland answer, but the reality is if you've got the right partner for a project, like all these things can be figured out. And then the next step of that is, a lot of it is, it's not about this, finding this special right product. And I think sometimes clients and even architects and designers fall victim to that of, oh, what's this amazing right product that we need to make this look right? A lot of times it's just following a process. You look at a TV. Everybody wants the TV as tight to the wall as possible. But, as you know, a lot of that is just the right process of specifying the right back box, specifying the right mount, having that conversation of how it's going to look and where it's going to look on the wall. And, and as people get, it's like, well, how are we spending almost as much money for the back box and mount as we are for the TV, since, TVs are free these days or close to it. But then again, you see it and you're like, oh, I get it. When we're walking into that bedroom and the first thing we see is the profile of that TV, do we want to see a bunch of cables and that sort of thing? Or do we just want to see something that's tight to the TV? Both are possible. A lot of it is just the right company following the right process to be able to achieve that. But my big thing is just consistency. Again, I go back to the lights and the speakers. If you're going to pay a premium for a mud-in light, then do the same for the speaker. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your money. And I think a lot of this we see is just in the planning phases of making sure that shade is in the right size pocket, or potentially that light switch, that there isn't a bank of 5 of them, that there's a neat single keypad that follows the aesthetic of the rest of the home. A quick anecdote, not from ASID. I've also spoken at AIA, American Institute of Architects. Back in 2017, I did a national event for them, and we went on a home tour, and we did all these architecturally significant homes. And the number one thing that the group photographed was we had one home where there were approximately 48, and this was early before lighting control was there, but there were 48 dimmers on a wall together to control the lights in a home, right? And I mean, people were just laughing and astounded and that sort of thing. But it's like people notice that sort of thing, right? I mean, again, back to the example, sometimes they notice when it's not right. But that's something that's just, I can't imagine trying to use that in my house, and it just kind of looks bizarre.
I was looking at a luxury house listing that somebody sent me the other day. It was an $8 or $9 million house, and all I could see was the banks of switches on the wall and the fact that this really nice, 90-inch TV or 80-inch TV was this far proud of the wall with cables hanging down the middle. And all I could think about was if somebody had just spent 15 minutes up front planning and doing that, the whole aesthetic of that room would have just changed dramatically. Now, obviously, we look at this with a very biased eye, but it doesn't take a tremendous amount of planning to really increase the aesthetics of a space, does it?
No, and actually in the presentation I did, so we kind of just did a background on a few different types of technologies and some best practices to try to make them more aesthetically pleasing. But then we actually went through an exercise where it was a before and after, and this is an area too where AI can be great because you can, virtually change it. But we went through some examples, and just one was a beautiful space where a wood ceiling, and they were using large white speakers. And it was an immediate distraction to the eye of everything else there, but your eye is drawn to those speakers. And I mean, functionally, I'm sure the room would have sounded great that way. But we kind of went through and said, all right, well, what if we first paint them? What if we make them a little bit smaller by using a different model? What if we even work with the manufacturer to mill out those boards so that those boards are continuous? And again, all these things are possible. And for a statement room, that's something that you very much may want to do. And similarly, like one of the things that I always cringe at, and I know a lot of designers hate, is sound bars. So, we've gone to using a lot of sound bars in our industry because TV speakers are terrible. They're tiny. They fire back into the wall. I feel like I'm 105 years old when I try to listen to a TV without a sound bar. But a lot of the sound bars that we sell these days, they don't match the design of the TV, the industrial design of the TV. A lot of times the widths are different. And, if you can go on some websites of major soundbar manufacturers, you can look at it and say, yeah, it's okay, but something's not right, and then you see it properly done. And you're like, yes, that looks intentional. And I think that's kind of the bottom line is, a lot of the balancing of form and function is just about making it look intentional.
There used to be a belief that the smaller the speaker, the worse the sound quality. Is that still true?
Yeah, so I'm going to throw on my mechanical engineering degree hat here for a minute. But, basic physics dictates that you can only create low-frequency sound by moving a certain volume of air, right? And so the problem with all of our little Bluetooth speakers and that sort of thing is that they're just not moving enough air to create those low-frequency bass sounds that we like so much. And, bass is one of those things where people kind of, I think, don't fully understand it. They think it's just that booming all the time. And the reality is a lot of times when we turn up volume, it's not because we want higher volume, we want more bass. A lot of the solutions that we're selling these days, obviously there's not enough volume if you've got like a 4-inch diameter speaker to do that. So we're supplementing either it with an external subwoofer, or you have these ones where there's a subwoofer in the ceiling that's much larger, that's pushing that air through the same opening as the high frequency sound.
And any favorite products or brands that you guys tend to use when it comes to high fidelity sound in smaller apertures?
Yeah, I mean, so we're big fans of Sonance as a company, both their Sonance and James brands. So the two top selling speakers that we have are the invisible speakers from Sonance, which are, about a $2,000 pair of speakers. One of the reasons we love that is digital amplifiers have allowed that sound to become so much better. And in certain situations, a dining room, a hallway, the type of sound that's emitted by that speaker, it's hard to kind of pick where the sound is coming from. So it really does a nice job of just giving even coverage over a big space. And then in something like the kitchen where you really want to crank it up and entertain, small aperture speakers are fantastic. They match the lights that you're putting in there. They have so much bass, so much punch. They look great. And it's crazy to me that at $3,500 a pair of speakers roughly, that's our number one selling speaker. And we're in Chicago where people tend to be a little bit more conservative in how we spend money. We're not particularly showy. And still, that is the number one speaker.
So clearly people are willing to spend money when it comes to balancing form and function in high visibility, high traffic areas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not a one size fit all. We tell people, in that kitchen, in that, entertaining family room space, do that. If the kids are just hanging out in the basement with their friends, by all means, a 10-inch speaker and 4-inch flange lights, and that is absolutely fine. So it doesn't have to be one size fits all. We love doing it one size fits all, that sort of thing. But by no means does it have to be that.
So tell us a little bit about the interview that you conducted. I know you're coming for my job here as a podcast host. I will say you did a pretty decent job, but I'm going to try and stay in this seat as long as I can here. So tell us a little bit about the interview that you did and what your takeaway was from it.
Yeah, so I interviewed Susan Curry of Susan Curry Design. She's a local interior designer in the Atlanta area that focuses on residential spaces. So I had not met her before that. We had a fantastic conversation. A couple things that really stood out to me in the interview. First of all, so Susan is an aging in place expert. She has certain certifications there. So we didn't get into it in great depth, but this idea that we've got a team that's helping people age in place is really intriguing to me. She brought up the idea that technology could be a really big factor in supporting that idea and allowing people to spend more times in their homes as they get older. So I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me. The other thing I think is, so we had a discussion about lighting. And so one of the things that she mentioned was, it's really great for us to be able to dynamically change aspects of lighting after the room has been built. And so, without getting into it, historically, you pick everything about a light, including its location. It goes in the ceiling. It's one color. It's one beam spread, that sort of thing. Well, with the next generation of lighting, we have the ability to change a lot of those things dynamically. And she brought up this concept of, on the fly, or even as things change over time, we can change some of those characteristics, that can greatly improve and aid designers and architects in achieving their goals of what a room looks like.
I thought that was a very interesting takeaway. We are obviously familiar with how that technology works today, but to hear that as a real need from an interior designer lends to that, hey, we should be working together and collaborating on these spaces instead of working in our own separate silos and hoping that it comes together for the outcome of the client.
Yeah, it was something that I had not thought about before, and it was really interesting to have a designer bring that up.
Well, as we get into the interview here, Bryan, I guess the last question I would ask you is, any advice for people that are building a home when it comes to balancing form and function? I mean, obviously we'll hear from the designer here and kind of her takeaway in that, but how would you, answer the same questions you asked yourself in that conversation?
Yeah, I think I touched on this earlier, but I'm a big fan of trying to keep the same team together whenever possible. So kind of going back to my comment about it's the who. If there is a architect and designer and builder and technology professional and lighting designer that have considerable experience working together and working together well, I would always err on the side of keeping that team together because they know each other's strengths, they know how each other work. So I think that's a good way of achieving some of that look that you want. Then, like I said, the equivalency. One other thing that I bring up too, that sometimes clients, homeowners are afraid of spending on technology. And the comment on that is, it's all going to change in 5 years anyways. And I think that's an important comment to sort of deconstruct a little bit, is when you look at the products that we sell, absolutely, there are some where the technology is changing so rapidly that in 5 to 7 years, it's not that the product's not going to be working, but it's just going to be whatever's newer is going to be so much better. I mean, think of our own iPhones, but, in the context of a house, you can think of things like, the Wi-Fi. That's probably changing every 5 to 7 years. You can think of potentially even security cameras and that sort of thing, just because the resolutions are getting better. So I can sort of understand the fear to spend on those things, but I would also argue those are important things. But if you look at things like speakers and lighting and motorized window treatments, these are things that are fairly permanent to the home that are probably going to be there 10, 15, 20 years. They're probably not going to be changed out until the homeowner decides to renovate that room again. I would not be afraid to spend in those things, right? Those are permanent. The technology is not rapidly changing. I think to get both a really high quality sound or look or whatever it is that you're going for, but also one that balances with the aesthetic design, don't hesitate to spend the money there.
Well, Bryan, thank you for taking the Intelligent Estate on the road for us last week. I hope our listeners enjoy the interview that you conducted. We'll put your contact information in the show notes and on the video here. And yeah, thank you again for helping us out. And I hope our listeners enjoy the interview coming up here.
Absolutely. And one last shout out to the Steelcase Camper and Dan Solution. So when I did this interview, we're in the middle of this rather large convention center at Atlanta. They had this little pop-up room where we did the podcast, and it actually works great. So special thanks to them. I would not have been able to do the interview without them. But thank you for having me as a guest and a guest host, I guess, in this case.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see if what comments we get about which host is better, and if you're coming for the mic, so I totally respect that. So,
all right, thank you.
All right, thanks for being with us today, Bryan. Everybody, I hope you enjoy the interview, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.
All right, we're here at the American Society of Interior Designers Gather event in Atlanta, Georgia. Gather is an event that brings interior designers from across the United States together for education, for recognition, for celebration. With me, I have Susan Curry, who's a local interior designer here in the greater Atlanta area. So, Susan, welcome to the Intelligent Estate Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. And just to start out, can you give us a little background about yourself, kind of how you got into this industry, a little bit about your firm?
Okay, yeah, and thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Well, I've had a varied career. I started out in the television news business in my 20s and did that for a while, and then I sort of fell into nonprofit fundraising and started doing interior design projects, helping people on the side, and then I returned to school as a returning student in my 30s and got an interior design degree, really doing what I love, what my passion is. I love color and incorporating color into my designs. I do residential design primarily. Have worked in commercial projects, but I really, like that personal relationship, working with the homeowner on how to, solve whatever issue they have in their home. I'm the president of the Georgia chapter of ASID, and, this organization has really been helpful in my career because you get lots of information, and the community and the support is great. But my firm is here. I've also practiced in New Orleans, and really, my time in New Orleans and enjoying the beautiful architecture there really continues to be an inspiration for me.
So there are a lot of team members to any design project, especially when building or renovating a home, right? You've got architects, you've got builders, you've got people like ourselves that bring in technology, lighting designers. What do you see as the role of the interior designer when building or renovating a home?
Well, typically we're hired by the homeowner. So in my opinion, we serve as their advocate, really making sure that things are done well and that all the finishes, furnishings, equipment really gets installed properly. At the end, oftentimes it's about training them on how to use certain things. But I think a really good interior designer is well versed in construction and architecture and really understands what's going behind the walls, because a home really depends on a solid foundation and good framing, and so I think that's really an important role for an interior designer to really partner with the general contractor, the architecture, and sort of be the eyes and ears for the homeowner. A lot of times they don't understand all that's behind what goes on in a renovation or even a new construction project. So helping them understand things, be their advocate, answer their questions.
Yeah, certainly. I think on a lot of projects that I've been involved with, the interior designer does have the ear of the homeowner, the client, right? And in a very good way, because it is a very difficult, kind of sometimes challenging process to manage. So you see that, and I think you all do a very good job of having that responsibility of making recommendations. Is there anything that you wish people, the homeowners, the design team, the build team, knew about interior design, or you think perhaps it's a little bit of there's misconceptions about interior design that are out there?
Well, I think a lot of them just think that we just care about the end result and it's pretty and attractive, but we really are concerned about the health, safety, and welfare of our clients and making sure that the space is safe for them. And it's just commonplace. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, you have such a fun job, and it is a fun job, but I would say that the beginning of the project, it's discovery and being creative and coming up with design schematics that are going to work for the client to consider, and then it really moves into a lot of logistics and details and making sure that finish schedules are completed, that when a sub comes on site, that they actually have what they need to make things work well. Specs. I mean, we not only do big giant spec notebooks for the job site, but we have them electronically sent to the general contractor and any subs that need it. And just making sure that people understand that they need to follow the manufacturer specifications when installing things, and if they don't do that, the warranty is going to be voided.
Sure. So shifting, this is the Intelligent Estate podcast, so shifting the focus a little bit of our conversation to technology in the home. Experiences that you've had with technology in the home, are there favorite technologies or types of technologies that you're regularly putting into homes of your clients?
Well, everybody's talking about internet and audio visual, so there's a lot of that, but I think the things that I'm most excited about are motorized shades and draperies. I think a lot of people just haven't thought about it. They might think it's a luxury. Maybe they feel like you're being a little bit lazy to be able to take that remote out and go click of the button. But I also think about, here in Atlanta, we have a lot of high rises, a lot of glass. And if you don't have the right shades or draperies in there, you can just get baked in the sun. I don't care if you have fabulous new windows that are insulated glass with UV protection, but the higher up you are, there's no shade, and you get glare, which makes it hard to read, hard to enjoy it, television, or even use a computer screen. So I love the pockets that we can put in and hide the tracks, or the motorized shade that goes up into the ceiling. And I love the fact that you can program it so that when the sun comes up, your shades go up. When it's going down, put them down. Also, the direction of the sun, when do they need to be down, because you're getting more of the south or southwestern sunlight.
Yep. Yeah, I actually presented a course yesterday here at Gather on integrating technology, and that was probably one of the biggest topics. And you're right, there are just some homes, especially with the amount of glass being put in homes today, it's a necessity. And we find that when people don't motorize them, they just leave them down all the time, somewhat defeating the purpose of there being glass in the first place. But and you're right too, I think the coordination is so critical. Of you can't just think about it afterwards. Is it going to be in a pocket? Is there a valance? Are there draperies? One of the things that we find is in bedrooms, some people, is it going to be darkening, or is it going to be truly blackout? Because there are some people that want zero light. Well, that means there can't be any light gaps on the shades, that we're either going to have to use heavy drapes, or we're going to have some side channels to bring them down.
Right. Again,
as you said, these are things very early on in the process that need to be discussed and thought about. And if so, anything's possible. It's a lot harder to do after the client sleeps in their bedroom for the first night. So. And
it might be that there are multiple layers. It might be that it's a roller shade that has two shades in there. One is a blackout. One is something that's a little bit more, has less opacity. And, I think about things like, how is it going to look when it comes down? Is it going to be a regular roll, or do we want to do a reverse roll that allows if it's going to show, allows it to look a little bit neater without having to use a valance? I also feel like a beautiful space includes layers. Just like we're in this podcast booth, there's the structure, there's furnishings, there's some plants, but I think that window treatments just are another important layer, along with the art that you want to put in a space to make it interesting. Okay, that's great. That's great commentary. We were speaking earlier about hiding certain technologies, and it seems that on a lot of projects that we've been on, there's always the discussion of, do you hide speakers, do you hide the TVs, that sort of thing. So let's talk about TVs. I know a lot of people don't like to see TVs. What are your thoughts on the design, the aesthetic design of TVs in a space? I think we all know that we have televisions in our home, but not having a big black screen on the wall or sitting on a console, I think is nice. The new art TVs are really a way to, make it a little bit more attractive, including, using those in a gallery wall with a client's art, so that it's not just the TV on the wall. So I love that, but also love hiding some things, putting speakers up in the ceiling, having them hidden with sheetrock, discreetly putting speakers on shelves so that they are more natural and aren't as big and clunky. I'm really not a fan of the sound bar underneath the television. So I love helping clients with making it sort of disappear, but still be useful for them.
And with sound bars, because they have grown a lot, and the reason for that is as TVs have gotten thinner, just frankly, TV speakers are terrible sounding. I joked yesterday in my session that I feel like I'm 100 years old when I'm listening to a TV from those speakers because you can't hear anything. So hence the rise of the sound bar. Do you ever do sound bars that are meant to match the TV, so it kind of reads as one unit? And what are your feelings on those? An improvement, or you still like to put them in the ceiling or somewhere else?
They're definitely an improvement, and it all depends on the situation you're working in, because every home is different, and you have to look at what you have there or how you're going to design the space to make it work. So yes, if you can't hide it, let's integrate it and make it look like it's part of the entire system. But with the technology and the audiovisual specialist, they can help program things so that you do get that great sound coming from speakers around the room.
Okay, great. We had spoken earlier that one of the things you specialize in is aging in place. And so if you just want to take a minute to talk about it, are there ways that technology either has helped, or could you see it helping in the future with the whole idea of aging in place?
Well, I think, the fact that we can command things with our voice is incredibly helpful. Whether you're using your phone, saying, "Hey Siri," or, Alexa, those definitely help someone who might have mobility issues. But with aging in place, it's really about anybody being able to use the space. I've helped older clients with mobility issues be able to control not only their window treatments, their audiovisual, but also having a lift chair or even devices that help them get in and out of the bed more easily. I also remind even my younger clients, you could have an accident and suffering from a sprained ankle or a broken bone, and you might find out that automation really is going to help you, and technology has come a long way.
Yeah. So along those lines, do you have a favorite piece of technology for your own home, or perhaps that you've installed in somebody's home?
Oh my goodness. Well, I like the remote that can control so much in one device, so you don't have 3 different remotes out. I know that there are times when people visit someone's home and they're like, well, which one do I use? So I think that's really nice, especially ones that you might be able to, speak into. But yeah, I will say the air conditioner that has that's connected to Wi-Fi is one of my favorites, because you can be in bed and decide that you want it a little bit cooler, and if you have it controlled with Wi-Fi, you can make the adjustment. So that's really one of my favorites. You can leave the house and realize I left the air conditioner up a little bit, a little too low, and you can adjust it remotely, or come back from a trip and be able to go, okay, I'll be arriving at 4:00 this afternoon. Let me adjust the thermostat so when I get in the house, it's nice and comfortable.
Gotcha. One of the things we were talking about earlier was just lighting in general and color temperature, somewhat in context of this space, but intelligent lighting fixtures and LED lighting in general has really transformed. It is transforming our industry. I assume it is for yours as well. Just any comments or thoughts on where lighting is today and where you see it going in the future?
Well, I've always been a big fan of dimmers, but now with the new lighting, you can adjust your color temperature to different times of the day. So let's say you get up in the morning and you want it a little bit, warmer, not as bright. You can, program that and then have other adjustments throughout the day to make it brighter. Maybe in the evening you need to start getting it back to a warmer, dimmer, relaxing, color temperature, and I would say lumens. You can adjust that. So I think that there's so much that has changed. They're also smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love the fact that some of the lights you can, you choose your color temperature, but you can change your to a flood,
Mm-hmm.
to a
The beam spread.
beam spread,
Mm-hmm.
and without having to make all those decisions up front. A long time ago, we had to decide the color temperature. We go, okay, this one's got to be a narrow spotlight. This one's got to be a medium flood or a flood. And you really had to make those decisions so far in advance. And now you've got a little bit more flexibility, and even some of the programmable lights, you can even do more.
That's interesting. So, that you bring up an interesting idea. Does that help you as an interior designer if you have that ability to, once you see the space together, say, oh, you know what, it really would have been nicer for this to have a wider beam angle, or it'd really be nicer for this to have a slightly different color temperature? Does that aid in your aesthetic design?
Oh, definitely. Because sometimes you might have a medium flood in there, and you realize it's making a funny wash on the walls. So if you change it, let's say it's in a hallway, you can change it to a spot. It really does help, because we try to be able to visualize and imagine everything that's going to happen in a space, but there are just some things that after you get towards the end of your construction project, you realize you need to make a few adjustments.
Gotcha. That's interesting. That's good feedback. Just kind of a couple questions here to wrap up. So one, is there anything that you wish as an interior designer that we as home technology professionals could do more of, or do something a little bit better? But how do you see us being able to aid you as an interior designer?
I think it's all about education and sharing information. I think the more you all invite us in, show us the options so that we can learn more and ask our questions is really critical. It really is, knowledge is power. And so I think the more we learn and share, we also can give you all perspective on what kinds of things we're thinking about when, deciding what technology to put in the home.
Okay, that's yeah. I think there are a lot of outreach. I know I do a lot of lunch and learns with for CEUs, for interior designers and architects. But I agree. I think having those open lines of communication, I think having those relationships, because as I say, building a home is a team sport, right? And it's really nice. Everybody has their role, but it's great when we get to work together. Final question here then. Totally separate from technology, what are the major trends that you are seeing in interior design going forward that may be of interest to us?
You know what? I think and this doesn't really relate to the home, but our offices are becoming a more comfortable setting. So it's not just someone having a task chair and a desk. They really are places where people can move around. They get to go outside and be exposed to the environment more. So I really think that is sort of a result of the pandemic and many of us working at home. People realize that they have to have their office space really be more comfortable for people. I also think that wellness is still a big trend. I think more and more people are thinking about how to design a space for not only physical needs, but for neurodiversity and being able to accommodate people who might have, I guess, be impacted by their environment depending on, how it's designed.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today with the Intelligent Estate Podcast. I learned a lot, so really appreciate you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad you invited me to participate.
Thank you.